briefly introduce yourself.
My name is Hitesh Mehta, and I'm the founder of HM Design, a unique one-of-a-kind planning and design firm which practices its very own quadruple bottom-line philosophy, one that balances economic, environmental, social, and spiritual aspects for every project. HM Design began in Nairobi way back in 1991 as a traditional landscape architectural practice, but it is now based here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and has metamorphosized into a specialty eco-planning and eco-design office. We have now consulted and worked in 64 countries spanning 6 continents.
What planning, design, and construction process did you use for this Superhouse?
Our approach right from day one was holistic. All architectural, landscape, and interior aspects were designed together in real time with environmental planning and eco-design principles in mind. My firm HM Design provided all architectural, landscape architectural, and interior architectural services, from concept to construction supervision. After a detailed site analysis, a rigorous to and fro design process was employed to create this one-of-a-kind experience for a residential project. Starting with plasticine models, several study models, all of which were demountable, were built to understand the complexities and improve the design, as well as to educate the structural engineers on the various cantilevers that we had. Light and shadow studies were carried out on the architectural models, and this helped to create the final ambience. These studies also helped to determine the roof overhangs so as to control the heat gain that goes into the building. Natural light was brought in as much as possible, like for example from roof lights and from windows, to reduce the dependence on artificial light. And these passive design techniques were an important part of the design process and helped the client save costs at the end. A 1:100 scaled final demountable model was kept on site to help all respective contractors to understand the interplay of the various spaces, like when part of the main living room cantilevers over the internal swimming pool so as to create this amazing floating experience.
Mr. Mehta, once you received the client's brief, what was your architectural response to it?
The brief from the client was that the house from the outside had to have a strong Kenyan contextual safari lodge aesthetic. And from the inside, what they wanted was a modern style. Their wish was that instead of them visiting a lodge every 6 months, they wanted actually to live inside one every day. The main concept of this extended family residential project was that of continuity of the vernacular, a home that fits into its Kenyan setting and built with local natural materials like say wood, stone, but employing modern interior spaces and design approaches. What we did was to implement the 3 primary shapes philosophy of the Bauhaus and juxtaposed these shapes and interplayed them to create the forms. A project where Kenyan vernacular architecture marries the Bauhaus. The main form of the house is borrowed from the Kenyan conical huts like you would find in Kikuyu land or Luo land. And this form is also reflected in the arrival guardhouse experience. The strong circular and organic forms of Kenyan vernacular architecture pervade right through the project, from architecture, interior architecture, to the outside landscape. The fireplace, as with all traditional Kenyan ways of living, is located right at the center of the lounge and the living areas. Being a multidisciplinary firm, HM Design spent a lot of time to study the inside-outside relationships, the views to the garden that the clients would get from the inside of the building, and the views of the building that they would get when they are in the garden were very important for us. In particular, the front entrance conical roof was punctuated with 3 openings so as to afford views of the garden from the upper level family room. The client is a deeply religious family, and the whole internal 2D and 3D layout of the house was designed to revolve around a prayer room which houses the idol of the Indian goddess Radha.
How about your philosophy on the garden design?
A professional landscape architectural drawing package was prepared for this project, and it included planting design plans as well. An arrival rose garden greeted the guests. A grass lawn here also acts as a grazing pasture for, believe it or not, a couple of cows that they keep because of their strong tradition. A wetland garden was designed under the arrival bridge into the house. A functional lawn from the swimming pool area was created as the client entertains many guests. Currently, the house has become popular for wedding functions and religious events. The main garden design was terraced in the shape of a peacock, which has strong symbologies with the client's ancestral background. An internal swimming pool and fountain with the lounge cantilevered over it provides a welcome respite after a long day at work.
What was your attitude to building technology and construction techniques?
It was always our intention to make this house both eco-friendly and climatic friendly. We used as many local materials as we could, including wood and the walls, the clay walls, and stone, etc. The only non-local elements in the whole house were the kitchen fittings, the bathroom tiles, and of course the light fittings. We also wanted to keep the house as low maintenance as possible. So some of the eco-design techniques that we used and the eco-technologies included, for example, the energy embodiment of materials was considered, especially as relates to external finishes, which are all natural, to emphasize the Kenyan context. Wooden slate for the roof, eucalyptus gum poles for the structures, the Mazera stone for wall finishes, the clay bricks for the floors, natural wood for entry bridges, and the sisal ropes even that we used for the connections of the eucalyptus gum poles, etc. The first floor windows were set back so that the strong equatorial sun is not allowed into the rooms. Another thing we also did regarding climatic design was that the air convection current techniques allowed for warm air to rise from below and then escape through the windows, the roof windows and the roof lights. Solar heaters fixed to the roof heat the water for the bathing. The other things we used were that for the pool area, special heat resistant glass was used to reduce heat gain. This thick glass also helped to eliminate burglar proofing and therefore save a lot of money and help bring security to the clients. The pool, the swimming pool, is heated by waste air from the central air conditioning system. And every single internal wall had a 1 to 20 elevation drone with the exact location for the light switches, the plug points, and for the bathrooms. All tiles were selected such that no tiles needed to be cut. So we were that focused on making this project as eco-friendly as possible. And then many of the light fittings were either compact fluorescent or LED.
With no budget, how do you restrain yourself from taking the cost through the roof, pun intended?
In the architectural world, we have a terminology for a project like this house. It is called a commission of the century. It's that kind of project that comes once every 100 years. This was a client who had done his research on us and then decided to place utmost faith and trust in us. He knew that we were not going to go overboard and propose like gold fittings and marble from Italy or chandeliers from France or tiles from Morocco and create this sort of ostentatious decorations that are very expensive. We have always been a down-to-earth kind of firm that practices ethically, and it is when we are given the go-ahead to fly, we become even more careful where the money is spent. Our office philosophy has always been to provide the best service to our clients and ensure that we realize their dreams in an affordable way. So even if our client had a budget, we would have approached the planning and design process and material selections in actually the same way. We wouldn't have changed because that's how we work, even up to today. The great thing about this client was that there was not one single cost that they questioned. Indeed, we could have never asked for a better client.
So, Mr. Mehta, what are your principles of an authentic superhouse?
We have designed quite a few super houses over the last 25, 30 years. And our definitions are that an authentic super house must, one, be designed specifically for the client and their needs and provides a sense of place for the client, not for the architect, but for the client. Two, it must be of an appropriate size and scale so that it is in harmony with the garden. Three, it must be resilient. A project that I worked on in the 80s, it's Chestnut Groves with Meraz Asani, just near Sarit Center. It is even up to today one of the most sought after townhouses, and this is after 31 years. A super house must also be eco-friendly. In today's world of excessive resource depletion and climate emergency, a super house needs to be low impact and eco-conscious. A super house must also showcase a beautiful marriage of house and garden, and where both are designed from day one. A super house must also be one that is timeless. If it is not connected form-wise to the context, it will for sure not be forever. This project was completed in 1998, and after 23 years, the original owners are still living in it, proving the sustainability of the project and the satisfaction it has provided to the clients.
How do you think that the Superhouse inspired other architects?
I was very fortunate that at HM Design I had a great team of architects working for me. What I did was when I moved to the US, I handed over my company to them, and they then, after another 2 years, started their own company. And this is Sandeep Rehal and Gurvinder Manku. They started their company Studio Infinity. And what they have done over the last 20-25 years, built also quite a few super houses themselves. And they continued providing this inspiration to other people that worked in the firm, their firm, people like Ali Manji, who was in your previous segment. There was, of course, Jaspal Singh, the owner of Sketch Studio. And he made all the original models for this project. And I'm sure he has been inspired over the years. And now he's also doing his own super houses. So you can see, apart from them, I'm sure students at the university and other architects are also getting inspired.
So, Mr. Mehta, to conclude, what would you advise upcoming Kenyan architects when designing a super house?
One of my advices would be that it is all about process. And if you take shortcuts, the end result will be an ordinary house. It is like as if you started building the roof of a house before you even did the walls. And those kinds of shortcuts would not work. So the planning process is crucial. The other thing is to spend quality time in the research and site analysis phase of the project. It's extremely important to understand the site and the context of that particular house. Another thing is to design the inside of the house and the outside all in real time at the same time. So make sure you bring in a landscape architect into the project from day one. This is their expertise. Let them do the outside of the houses. Important thing is to leave your ego behind by designing a super house. A design that suits the needs of the client and ensures that you have respect for all living species on the site. You also need to ensure that your super house is climatic friendly, uses natural materials, and designed with passive design techniques. And lastly, my final advice is that you must ensure that the architectural form, the elevations, and sections have a strong aesthetic appeal. That is important.